Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. About that time for our weekly Michigan spring practice check-in, highlighting some players that are really starting to stand out as the days and weeks go on for this Michigan program during spring practice. And I think what's most exciting for us Michigan fans is, as the days and weeks go on, we're getting a better feel for how this Michigan team is going to look and who are going to be the guys for this Michigan team heading into 2024. You take us back 12 months ago. Most people listening to this, we probably could say what that Michigan roster and what that Michigan team was going to be in 2023. Fast forward to right now, we have a lot of new faces coming in and are going to be productive for this Michigan program. Excited to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and a truly massive shout out to the Michigan fans. Many of y'all know, not a program in the country I love talking about more than my Michigan Wolverines. And the amount of support the Michigan fans have shown, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, spring practice, the coaching hires, it means the world to me. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start exactly how we started our spring practice check-in last week, and that is with the quarterback conversation. Last week, we highlighted true freshman Jaden Davis. You read the spring practice reports, you read the buzz that's coming out of spring practice. It does sound like Alex Orji is kind of emerging as that quarterback one candidate. And I've been putting a lot of thought into this Michigan quarterback room. And I totally understand. There are a lot of different Michigan fans that have a lot of different opinions on who they would like to see as the starting quarterback, whether it's true freshman Jaden Davis, whether it's Alex Orji, whether it's Jaden Denigal. There are a lot of different opinions. How I've been thinking about this quarterback battle is that I think a lot of Michigan fans are rooting for Alex Orji, because if Alex Orji emerges as the quarterback one in this Michigan offense, that probably has the highest ceiling for this Michigan offense. And what I mean by that is if Alex Orji reaches his potential and kind of just goes outright and beats out some really solid quarterbacks to be that starting quarterback for Michigan, that's probably the best version of this Michigan offense. And that's because Alex Orji, if he puts it together, you're looking at one of the more talented quarterbacks in all of college football. Not only a phenomenal athlete, can significantly help Michigan in that run game, but a guy that has a howitzer of an arm, can make every single throw that you want him to make. You just have the question marks about the accuracy, about going through his progressions. And I think you trust Sherrone Moore and Kirk Campbell to not trot Alex Orji out there if he's not going to be consistent, if he's not going to take care of the football. So if Alex Orji continues to emerge as Michigan's starting quarterback, I largely think that's good news for Michigan fans, because I think he offers the highest ceiling for this Michigan program and this Michigan offense in 2024. Again, we'll continue to talk about this quarterback battle. Obviously, we'll be recapping the spring practice, but does sound like Alex Orji is kind of the leader in the clubhouse. And at least as a Michigan fan myself, that is extremely exciting for me. And I'm sure extremely exciting for a lot of us Michigan fans heading into 2024. Next player I want to talk about, and arguably my favorite player on this Michigan roster, certainly one of my favorite players, is offensive tackle Myles Hinton. And why I want to talk about Myles Hinton is I went back and watched some Myles Hinton early on in that 2023 season, and I was thoroughly impressed. I went back and watched that whole Rutgers game more times than I'm proud of. I think Myles Hinton fits exactly what Michigan wants to do on the offensive side of the football. You talk about road grader in the run game, even going back to last year where we had 3 offensive tackles that entered into the NFL draft. I'd probably say Myles Hinton was the best run blocking offensive tackle that we had on that roster last year. There were some struggles in pass protection, which I think led to other guys starting ahead of him. The feedback out of spring practice is one that Myles Hinton has first-round caliber traits to him as an offensive tackle, but more importantly, if he takes some strides as a pass protector, I truly think you might be looking at one of the better offensive tackles in the country heading into 2024, and it's extremely encouraging that Myles Hinton seems to be putting it together, right? He came over from Stanford. Don't blame him for coming to Michigan. Michigan's had a ton of success developing offensive linemen. This was a guy that even coming out of high school, we kind of knew had elite traits. If Michigan going into year 2 with him can kind of bring those traits out and really polish him up, I am extremely excited to see what Myles Hinton can be as an offensive tackle for Michigan. A lot of people assume that this Michigan offensive line is going to take a step back. And although it might not be as good as we saw in 2023, it's going to be one of the better offensive lines that we see in the country because we know what we have, kind of replacing some of that NFL talent. Last guy I want to talk about on the offensive side of the football, and again, one of the more important players for this Michigan program in the 2024 season, and that's wide receiver Tyler Morris. I think the big question for a lot of Michigan fans outside of the quarterback competition is who's going to step up as this Michigan's kind of wide receiver one. And I think we all know that we're our true wide receiver one is at the tight end position in Colson Loveland, a guy that I've said multiple times I think is the best tight end in the country in 2024. But I also know a lot of Michigan fans want to see a little bit more explosiveness in that passing attack, and you need some wide receivers to step up. Tyler Morris is a guy that you kind of saw emerge as a breakout guy in 2023. This is kind of his year to really put a stamp on this Michigan wide receiver room. And going back and kind of doing some reading on him coming out of high school, this was a guy that was a junior Olympic gold medalist in the high jump. And you see it on the field. This guy has a lot of twitch. He's extremely explosive. There's two ways to manufacture explosive plays in the passing attack. One way is pushing the ball down the field, which again, Alex Orji, if he can dial in that accuracy, has no problem accessing the deeper third. But the other way to kind of create explosive plays in the passing attack is getting the football out to your wide receivers quickly, on time, and in space, and letting them work after the catch. I think that's where Tyler Morris can really come in. And you look at this Michigan wide receiver room, it has a lot of guys who are very good working after the catch. And that's something that I'm looking for, especially with kind of easing in a new quarterback after losing a guy like J.J. McCarthy. You want to give the quarterback some easy throws. And the quarterback's best friend, a new quarterback's best friend, is two things. One, an explosive run game. Two, wide receivers that can make stuff happen after the catch. I think Tyler Morris certainly could be one of those wide receivers. Obviously, Samaj Morgan, very good after the catch as well. I think we see a lot of that for this Michigan offense, really kind of maybe taking a little off our starting quarterback's plate and putting a little bit more on the plate of these wide receivers in terms of extending plays after the catch. Now, moving over to the defensive side of the football, I want to give another shout out. Last week, we shouted out TJ Guy. And we've talked about, we know this Michigan defensive line in terms of the starting four is one of, if not the best in the country, right? Mason Graham and Kenny Grant on the inside, Josiah Stewart, and a guy like Derek Moore on the outside. I would challenge any college football fan to name a better starting four in the country. But our main question is, what does the depth look like on that defensive line? I've been very vocal that I think Michigan had a lot of success last year because of its depth, because of its ability to kind of keep guys fresh. We're kind of looking for guys who are going to step up in the depth department, right? TJ Guy, you continue to read the spring practice reports. He continues to be a guy that sounds to be going to be a main contributor for Michigan. Another guy that's kind of sneaky that doesn't get a ton of buzz around his name is Cameron Brandt, who was committed to Stanford in that 2023 class. Late in the process, flipped to Michigan. This was a guy that you kind of came in and said, all right, you didn't really expect him to play much early because of how loaded the edge rusher room was for Michigan, but was a guy that kind of offered some ability to play early if we needed him to, right? He came into Michigan 6'4", almost 255 pounds, heavy hands, can be very good in the run game. And it sounds like he's emerging as another guy that Michigan might be able to rely on at that edge rusher position. And I mean, that's exactly what we wanted to hear, right? We know what we have with D. Moore, Josiah Stewart, but if TJ Guy, Cameron Brandt can step up at those edge rusher positions, now you start feeling good about the depth of this Michigan defense. And I think that's a massive storyline for us Michigan fans to follow. Next guy I want to talk about, and a guy we've talked a lot about, y'all know is one of my personal favorites, and that's the transfer from Maryland, Jayshon Barham, who sounds to be maybe the best linebacker in this Michigan program already, only been on campus for, a couple of months. And why I wanted to highlight that is, one, you're replacing two stalwarts in this Michigan defense in Mikey Barrett and Junior Colson. But more importantly, when we talk about this a lot, how you can have an elite defense, an elite duo is having dogs on the defensive line, specifically on the inside, which we certainly have with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant? And then can you partner that up with athletic linebackers that can get downhill? And the reason I say that is a lot of linebackers really thrive behind elite defensive lines. If defensive lines can win up front, allowing linebackers to play clean, that's a really hard combination for opposing offenses to deal with. And I think if Jayshawn Barham emerges as kind of an all-American caliber linebacker, which, I mean, it sounds like he's kind of emerging as a guy for Michigan, that's going to be massive news for this Michigan defense. You think about the ways that Wink Martindale is going to get creative with this front seven. If we get that linebacker play with Ernest Hausman, Jayshawn Barham, it sounds like Jimmy Rolder is kind of making some strides. I am very excited to see what Wink Martindale can scheme up with that front seven. The best way to, I don't know if we say we need to hide our Michigan secondary, but if we have some question marks early with some new faces, I mean, the best way to take some pressure off, that's probably a better way of phrasing it, taking pressure off a Michigan secondary that might have some youth to it, is having a front seven that's dominant. And it sounds like Michigan's front seven might be dominant heading into 2024. I think we all know it's going to be dominant in 2024. And that combination between an elite inside of your defensive line and then elite linebackers, that's really exciting for Michigan fans. Last guy I want to talk about, and I think one of the bigger storylines that I think a lot of Michigan fans have, and Mikey Sandstrom was a guy that never got the respect across the country, but all the Michigan fans knew how valuable he was to that Michigan defense the last 2 years. We got to replace, in my mind, the best nickel in the country in that 2023 year in Mikey Sandstrom. We've thrown out a lot of names. Jaden McBurrows, I think, has been a guy that's a very popular name to come in, and it sounds like he's kind of emerging as that nickel for Michigan in 2024. You can get creative with Jaden McBurrows. He is certainly capable of playing that boundary, but you look at the body type, maybe a little bit of a shorter, quick twitch kind of cornerback. You want those kind of guys in that nickel position, and it's an important part of this Michigan defense, right? You take a look at how we use like Dax Hill or Mikey Sandstrom, giving a lot of different looks, using these guys in blitz packages, obviously having to be able to be good against a run. If you're going to play that nickel position, you need a good nickel in this Michigan defense, and it sounds like Jaden McBurrows is kind of emerging as that good nickel for Michigan. Those are my 6 guys that I wanted to shout out for this spring practice check-in. Again, early next week, we'll have another spring practice check-in, continue to kind of just go through this Michigan roster and keep getting a feel for how this Michigan team is going to look in 2024. Appreciate y'all rocking with the boys. Shout out to Michigan fans. The amount of support, again, means the world. Can't thank y'all enough, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.